Music Business, What Is This? Is a podcast that focuses on the ever-changing music industry and presents issues and concerns that the average and above average musician has or will encounter. Hey everybody, I'm Richard Johnson.
I'm Jeremiah Hunt.
And this is Music Business.
What is this?
Today we're going to be talking about what is the first thing you do when you get the call for that gig.
That's right.
That's right. Now that gig could be any gig, but we want to talk about the gigs that you really want. Like what is your process? Someone calls, you get the gig. What does that mean? Okay. So somebody calls you for a gig. What do you do? What's the first thing you do?
First thing I do, if it's the gig that I really want, then I, prioritize. I look at my calendar and I look and see if I already have something in that space.
Okay.
That day.
All right.
And if I don't, bam.
Okay, so you said if it's the gig that you really want. What if it's a gig you don't really want?
The gig that I don't really want, I'll assess all of the gig information. I'll try to get more information about the gig. And I'll try to do that anyway. As much information as I have, the better.
Okay. So you're making a decision. If it's the gig you want, it's like, I'm going to make this happen.
I'm trying to make it happen to the best of my ability, no matter what the situation is.
Okay, and if it's I don't want to say a regular gig, because you shouldn't put that in your mind as a regular gig, but, not high priority level number one.
Right.
You assess the other things. What are those other things you're assessing?
Pay.
Okay.
Yes, that is a factor. Pay is a factor, but how is this gig going to benefit me?
Okay.
How is it going to benefit my career? How is it going to benefit me monetarily? And just moving forward in general.
Okay, so for you, it's not an immediate yes.
It's not an immediate yes.
Okay, so what is that response time for you?
I respond pretty fast.
Okay, so that process takes generally an hour, maybe a little longer, because you have to consider you don't want to lose the gig. Because some people are like, it used to be before a text, people gave you lots of time to respond. Now with a text, it's like, it's different for everybody.
Yeah.
But if you get a text at 9 a.m, it's a lot of people by 9 at night, they're like, hey, what's going on? If they check in.
Right.
So
I usually, for me, if I'm the band leader, if I text someone for a gig, usually after 24 hours, if I don't hear back from the person, then it's like disregard my text message because in most cases, I'm looking for someone else.
Okay. Okay. So there's a time limit to that.
Yeah.
Okay. Now you get that call. What's the next thing you do? Or you get that text?
If communication is the most important thing. So, if I see the text message, let's say I'm out on another gig or something like that, or if I'm at another job, and if I don't have the time to respond right away, if I have the time to get a break or something like that, or after the gig, I'll respond, immediately. Yes, I'm interested in doing this. If it's the gig that I really want. Okay.
And here's a point I wanted to bring up, because this happens to me. You're on a gig. You get a text, or I don't know, you're doing something important and you forget.
Yep.
And there's this time of how important really is the gig.
Right.
And sometimes you just forget. You got a lot of stuff going on. And what I've realized with text messages, we prioritize the value of it without even thinking about prioritizing it. Right? Because if someone says, I have a $5,000 gig for you, bling, I'm willing to bet you're going to write them right back, or as soon as you are done playing, you're going to respond. Now, if it's a $50 gig, it goes in this other box. I have a gig, but, the response time, it may not have that weight as much as the $5,000 gig. Has that happened to you?
Yes.
Okay. All right.
Yeah.
So do you have anything specific you do to remind yourself?
Yeah, there's a reminder app in my iPhone that I use. So if I don't put if I do get a request or a gig offer that I really want and that I'm like, it's in the forefront of my brain, I'll put it in my calendar immediately once I tell the leader that, yes, I want to confirm this gig.
Okay.
But if I don't text back immediately, I'll put a reminder to text this person back later.
Okay, so, and I know the app Reminder, I use it for different schools, for lots of different things I do. And that's good. My question is, if you're on a gig and you're in the middle of something, because here's a scenario. You're on a gig, your phone's on the music stand, a text comes through. You have 3 seconds, you read it, right? You should be focusing on the music, but I'm just keeping it real. This is what happens. You see it, here's the gig, it's this amount. You can't pick up your phone
Right.
and respond right then.
Yeah.
So
They should play the trumpet.
right. Yeah, I guess you
Why not,
could.
baby?
Yeah. You could definitely do that. I guess piano too, if they weren't looking.
Right.
But is there a process? Do you see what I'm saying? Like, you can't do it right then. You're in the second tune of a set. You still got 50 minutes left. Is there anything that you do during the course of the day, the gig, to refresh your mind that this text comes through? Because depending on your job and how busy you are, you can easily get, I don't know, between 20, 60, 80 texts a day.
Yeah.
So, I mean, that's a lot of information just to remember.
It is.
So that's what I'm asking. Is there any kind of, do you have a process?
Yeah. Not really. And this is something that I probably should come up with, is a process like that, because as a bassist, I mean, sometimes, especially in the summertime, I'll have like 3 gigs a day.
Right.
And
right.
I'll after one gig, the next thing I'm thinking about is going to the next gig.
Exactly.
And so I don't have time to read that text message and really think about, if
right.
I want to.
And this leads to several other questions, double booking, blah, 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 So that's why I'm asking, is there a procedure, because you're a working bass player,
Yeah.
to avoid these things that students or people should know about?
Yeah. I wouldn't say that I don't have I just try to do the best that I can at, checking my phone and just going through, who I've been texting, who I've sort of prioritized in my texting, and try to keep categories of people that I deal with.
Okay.
And just try my best to keep up with those people.
Okay.
Daily.
One of the things that I do is, at the end of the night, whatever that is, depending on where I'm at in the world, I try to, before I go to bed or before I have something to do, I go and backlog. I look at all the texts I've received for the day, right? And some I'll remember,
idea.
some I'll forget. But that at least gives me a chance to be like, oh, I forgot about this because I was in the middle of driving, or I was in the middle of a gig, or blah, blah, blah. I need to get back to so-and-so about this gig.
Right.
Right. So for me, that's one of the things that I try to do, usually once a day, sometimes twice a day, but once a day. That at least gives me a window of like 12 or 14 hours, depending on when you get up and go to bed. And that's kind of enough. It's a safe zone to get back to people before they're like, okay, they haven't responded, get somebody else.
Right.
And that's why my first question was, what is your response time depending upon the gig? Because if it's something we want to do right away, it's like, cool, we put it in if we can't immediately. But sometimes we just can't.
Right.
Right. So that's why I'm just asking you, and I like to ask people in general, what is your process? I'm sure there's things I haven't thought of, and that's what this podcast is about. We want people to write in and tell us, what is your process? Because I'm sure there's several other things that people do that we should all know about. because it's actually good for all of us.
Yeah.
You know, if you want somebody on a gig, there's nothing like hearing, oh man, I could have did that gig, but I just forgot to get back to you.
Right.
And the other person's like, oh man, now I had to get so-and-so. And if you could have did it, we could have did these two, you know, it's that whole thing. And it happens.
Yep.
Okay.
I just went through that.
Oh, really? Yeah, it happens. It's
Happens
reality.
all the time.
Yeah. Okay, so do you use a calendar?
Yes.
Okay, what calendar do you use?
Primarily, I use my phone.
Okay, so whatever calendar is in your phone.
Mm-hmm.
Is that
I think
like
it's the app, the calendar app.
Okay.
Yeah.
So
it's just
you
like a
have
general-
that's an iPhone?
Yeah.
Okay,
the
so
iPhone.
generally you're putting that in the calendar. Now is that synced to your
It's synced to my computer and to my iPad.
Okay.
So
you have 3 different places to
Yeah.
locate it, to see it.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I think the visualization is important.
Yeah.
Because having it in one place, that's good. That's better than nothing.
Mm-hmm.
But when you have it in multiple other places and they sync up, that gives you more chance to see it and process it
Yeah.
in real time. So for instance, I have some gigs coming up. I've been thinking about it, but you know, we have several gigs, so we have lots of music to learn. That may trigger, oh, okay, so-and-so didn't send me the music. I know we're playing 2 sets, so it's got to be blah, blah, blah amount of tunes or originals. So that just gets the brain going, thinking about, let me reach out to this person if you need to get it. Because depending upon your schedule, like you said, if you got 3 gigs a day, you're easily talking about at least 24 tunes,
Right.
depending on the length of the gig. And if they're all originals, that's a lot of tunes.
Yep.
Right. So that's why we're talking about this process of what is it you do to remind yourself once you get the gig. You know, because I've seen plenty of times people start scrambling the day of or the day before, and you know, you've got all these tunes because people just didn't send it because they're busy, because they're doing other gigs.
Yeah.
You know, so sometimes it's just a matter of sending a text or a reminder to someone because they probably have it,
Right.
especially if they're originals and they just have to send it. All right. So, I mean, for me, I use what's in my phone too, and it connects to my Google account. So I can see it on my Google Calendar. And for me, it's important because my family members can see it because I'm traveling all the time. My better half's traveling even more. So we have to, if we don't talk, which is very likely a lot of the times because I'm in one country, she's in another country, or she's on a gig, my folks, we have to have this constant communication for if someone's on a plane for 13 hours, what's going on?
Right.
You know, and our lifestyles change at the drop of a hat, depending on the gig.
Yeah.
And that may sound crazy, but it's real.
Yeah.
You know, example is the other day I didn't even get a call. I'm reading a newsletter and I see my name's on this gig. I'm reading a newsletter. This is a real story. I say, wow, okay. I didn't know I was on the gig, you know? So call them up. Hey, you're on the gig? Oh, yeah, we haven't gotten around to getting to you. Oh, okay. So now I'm trying to figure out how I can make this gig happen. I'm on it. I may or may not. But my point is the response time, your awareness, and planning for these things. Because now there's a whole nother set of music that I'm going to have to learn.
Yeah.
You know, so that's why I'm asking, and I'm asking you, what do you do when you get gigs? What's your process? Because that kind of affects everything.
Yeah.
And we figure out how to fit it all in, but you want to give yourself the best opportunity to sound as good as you can. And a lot of that is planning and what goes into that specifically.
Yeah.
So that's why I was asking about the calendar aspect of it. Okay, so what do you put in your calendar? Is it just gig?
Yeah. I put the gig with whoever it is, and then I'll put the location. All the details. Put the location. I'll put the time. You know, from this time to that time, and then over in the notes section of the calendar, I'll put any miscellaneous details or any other details that I need to know. and the pay, like how much I'm getting paid, just for my records.
Okay, so you can reference that. And does your calendar maintain that information after the gig for 5 months, 6 months, a year?
Yeah, it maintains it. I don't know how long it maintains it for. I need to look into that.
Right,
But
that's something you may want to
definitely-
look at because different calendars do different things.
Yeah, they'll delete it after.
Right,
a
so
certain
you
amount of
want to
time.
at least be aware what that is, especially if you're using an outside source. There's so many things you can use now that's free that you don't have to pay, but if it's free, that means they're stored somewhere. And how long is it free for?
Right.
Right, so you want to look into those things because if that's your reference come tax time and it deletes January 1st, you're in trouble. Right, so that's why I'm saying just look into it, see what it is. It may not be an issue, but you don't want it to really be an issue because you're not going to go back and remember a year's worth of details
Right.
about a gig. Okay, so when you put in the gig time, do you put in the transportation time?
Well,
And do you not understand what I'm saying? Like, okay, the gig is 20 miles away. I need an hour to get to the gig. Or do you
I
just
account for?
do you account for the
time to-
transportation time, or do you just put in gig 6 o'clock 9 to 9 o'clock?
I put in gig from 6 o'clock to 9 o'clock. You know, if the gig starts at 6, I'll probably put 5:30. And I'll generally I'll get prepared to leave an hour before the time of the gig. So I'll set an alarm with my alarm clock on my phone to go off an hour before that 5:30 call time.
Okay.
And that'll let me know that, okay, I have an hour to get there.
Okay. And how does that affect you when you have 3 gigs? Is it 2 alarms, 3 alarms?
No, it just depends. I usually plan out the day at the beginning of the day, but I'll have the alarm for the first gig.
Okay.
And then after the first gig, I just sort of, usually I'm going from gig to gig.
Okay.
Anyways.
Okay, so
So I don't need an alarm.
now when you're going gig to gig, are you planning out what you're going to wear, what you need to take, all these things? Because, for instance, say your first gig is an acoustic gig, acoustic bass. Your second gig, you play an electric. Last gig, let's say it's electric again. How do you process that? Like, what are you going to do? I mean, because you have an acoustic bass, and let's say it's 100 degrees out, like it's going to be today.
Yeah.
What is your thought process?
Yeah, it's a couple options that you can look at when you have a situation like that. And I have been in situations like that where I've played a gig that, on a hot day, was a gig in the morning, like a recording session, played for an orchestra. And then I literally had to go to another gig where I'd play out in the sun and I had to bring my upright, but I would be playing electric. So the best thing for me to do, well, there's 2 things that I would do. One, I would ask the first venue, could I leave my bass there? Depending on if I have, like sometimes you'll play that venue 2 nights in a row. Sometimes I'll ask the venue, can I leave my bass there,
Okay.
in a safe place, and I'll just come pick it back up later. Or if I take my bass with me, if I have time, I'll just drop it off at home, if depending on where the gig is.
Gig is at right location.
Yeah. Or if I take my bass with me, I'll need to have a place to store it because you can't keep it in the car.
Right. So these are things you have to process when you get that call.
Yeah.
What are you going to do with that instrument, your instrument, so you don't end up paying on the back end, or just simply so it works?
Right.
Right. You have to
Absolutely.
consider those things. Anything else that happens when you get the text? Or
Well,
call?
on the other side of it, this is something I wanted to point out. Band leaders often they have their own process of calling other players too. So an important thing for me is communication. Like, even if a band leader calls me for a gig and if I accept the gig, let's say 3 weeks before the gig starts. The week of, I'll line up my whole week. I'll draw out my whole week, and I'll try to communicate with the band leader. Hey, are we still good for this day? You know, I'm looking.
So
forward
you
to
reach
seeing
out.
you. I'll reach out. Yeah.
Okay. All
Hey,
right.
are we still good for this day? You know, I'm looking forward to it. Blah blah blah. And in some cases, they'll be like, "Yeah, I'm looking forward to it." But in some cases, they'll say, "Oh, I had so and so on this gig. I double booked."
Okay, so why are you doing that as a formality to reach out if they've contacted you? Or are you doing that just to check they didn't get somebody else?
It just depends. Well, I do it as a formality generally, but also it depends on the type of communication level. Like sometimes, you know, people have different ways of communication. Like they'll put a thumbs up.
Yep.
And, you know, sometimes people won't be clear. Sometimes people are clear. You know, gig place, gig time, pay. You're on it, like confirmed.
Okay. Right.
The thing that lets me know that I'm on the gig and that there's no problem is when the person says confirmed.
Okay.
When they
So you're
text
looking
back.
for that.
I'm looking for that confirmation. If I don't get that, then, you know, if they ask me like 3 weeks back and then it's the week of, I'll maybe I'll reach out to them and say, hey, I'm looking forward to this gig.
Okay.
You know.
So what if the person writes you a week before and says, here's the music, or the time has changed? Is that text enough information for you to say, oh, I'm confirmed? Or are you looking for another text saying confirmed?
That's enough information.
Okay.
Yeah. They send me the music, then it's like, all right.
Okay,
Yeah.
good. Okay. Cool. Well, that brings us to a close for another episode of Music Business.
What is this?
Thank you for joining us. You can find us on Spotify, SoundCloud, and Apple Music. It's been a pleasure. I'm Richard Johnson,
I'm Jeremiah Hunt.
and we'll see you later.
Peace.
This program is partially supported by a grant from the Illinois Arts Council Agency.